The usually calm and composed morning atmosphere on Lorraine was anything but ordinary that Thursday. The show's vibrant host, Lorraine Kelly, known for her infectious smile and sharp wit, was set to interview one of Britain's most beloved actors, Jim Broadbent. The veteran star of Iris, Moulin Rouge, and Harry Potter had been on a promotional tour for his new independent film, The Quiet Stranger, a project he described as the most personal of my career. But nobody expected the segment that followed to turn into one of the most talked about moments in British morning television history. As cameras rolled, Lorraine greeted him warmly. "Jim, it's so lovely to have you with us this morning," she said, flashing her trademark smile. Jim nodded politely, but his expression was unusually tense. "Thank you, Lorraine. It's interesting to be here," he replied in a measured tone. The audience chuckled softly, sensing his dry humor. But Lorraine, ever perceptive, noticed the underlying edge in his voice. "So, your new film, The Quiet Stranger, explores isolation and aging in modern Britain. It's quite different from your usual roles. What drew you to such a heavy theme?" she asked. Jim leaned back, his hands clasped. "Well, Lorraine, what drew me was honesty. We live in a society that celebrates youth and celebrity but ignores the elderly, the ones who actually built this country. The film is about that neglect." Lorraine nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, it's an important message. But some critics say the film paints a rather bleak picture, even politically charged. Do you agree?" That question hit a nerve. Jim's eyebrows arched sharply. "Politically charged? Everything's political, Lorraine. Art reflects life. When we show truth, people call it political because they're uncomfortable." The tone of the room shifted. Lorraine tried to keep things light. "Of course, but don't you think audiences sometimes want to escape reality, especially after the few tough years we've all had?" Jim's eyes narrowed slightly. "Escape? That's the problem, isn't it? We've escaped too much. We scroll, we stream, we forget to feel anything real. Cinema used to wake people up, now it lulls them to sleep." There was a tense pause. Lorraine smiled politely, attempting to diffuse the growing tension. "That's quite a strong opinion, Jim. But you know, entertainment can also comfort people." Jim leaned forward, his voice calm but cold. "Comfort is fine, Lorraine. But comfort without truth is complacency. That's what television sells, comfort. Endless, sugary comfort." The audience gasped softly. The comment clearly hit too close to home. Lorraine, visibly stunned but maintaining her composure, replied, "Well, that's a bit harsh, don't you think? Television brings joy to millions. You've been part of that world too." "I have," Jim admitted, his voice rising slightly. "And that's exactly why I'm speaking up now. We've traded substance for ratings. We talk about celebrities, diets instead of poverty. About fashion instead of truth." Lorraine's lips tightened. "Jim, with all due respect, this is a morning show. We're here to entertain, not to lecture." Jim smiled faintly. "And maybe that's the tragedy, Lorraine." A hush fell across the studio. Producers in the control room began exchanging worried glances. Lorraine, now visibly frustrated, decided to take back control. "Well, perhaps your film can do the lecturing for you," she said curtly, forcing a laugh. "Let's show a clip before our viewers lose their morning appetite." But Jim didn't laugh. "You can mock all you want," he said, standing up slightly in his chair. "But art has power. And if we don't use it to tell the truth, then we're all just playing a part in the lie." The audience fell silent. Lorraine shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes flicking toward the producers. One of them gestured frantically to cut to commercial. But before the cameras switched off, Jim stood up completely and added in a low, stern voice that carried through the studio microphones. "You asked me here to talk about the truth, but the truth isn't something you can schedule between ads for cereal and perfume." And with that, he removed his microphone and walked off the set. Lorraine's shocked expression froze for a moment before she quickly turned to the camera. "Well," she said with an awkward laugh, "that was certainly unexpected. We'll be right back after the break." The screen faded to commercials, but the damage was done. Social media exploded within minutes. Hashtag Jim Broadbent meltdown and hashtag Lorraine Live began trending on X, formerly Twitter. Some viewers praised Jim for speaking truth to television, while others accused him of being rude and arrogant. By the time the show returned from the break, Jim was already gone. Lorraine, ever the professional, smiled through the rest of the program, but her tone was noticeably colder. Later that day, ITV released a brief statement. Greater than, this morning's discussion between Lorraine Kelly and actor Jim Broadbent became unexpectedly heated. We thank Jim for his time and wish him the best with his new film. But behind the scenes, insiders whispered that Lorraine had told producers she didn't want him back on the show, ever. And as for Jim Broadbent, he remained unapologetic when asked later by a reporter outside his hotel. I said what needed to be said, he replied simply. If that gets me kicked off a morning show, so be it. What began as a promotional appearance had turned into a cultural flashpoint, one that reignited the debate about truth, media, and the price of speaking out. The morning after the explosive interview, the entire British media was buzzing. Headlines flooded tabloids and digital platforms alike. Jim Broadbent storms off Lorraine's set. Lorraine Kelly left speechless by actor's outburst. TV legend or trouble. The internet divides over Jim Broadbent's fiery remarks. Lorraine Kelly, the ever-smiling queen of daytime television, woke up to a storm she hadn't seen coming. Her phone was full of notifications, from producers, journalists, and even celebrities offering support or curiosity. She scrolled through social media, her face tightening as she saw clips of the confrontation circulating with millions of views. One viral post had already hit 2 million views in less than 12 hours. Greater than, Jim Broadbent destroys fake morning TV with brutal honesty. Lorraine sighed deeply. She knew the entertainment industry loved controversy, but being the center of it was another matter. Her producer, Emma, called moments later. Lorraine, we're trending everywhere, Emma said, trying to sound upbeat. The network's happy with the ratings, but we might need to do some damage control. Lorraine pinched the bridge of her nose. Damage control. I was humiliated on live television, Emma. The man practically called my show a circus. Well, Emma hesitated, some viewers actually agree with him. Lorraine's jaw tightened. Of course they do. People love a hero who speaks truth. But what about professionalism? What about respect? Meanwhile, Jim Broadbent sat quietly in his London flat, sipping tea as the world debated his name. He wasn't on social media himself, but his agent had been bombarded with calls. Reporters were camped outside his building. When a BBC journalist approached him later that day, Jim didn't hide. Standing by his doorway, he simply said, I didn't insult anyone. I criticized the system, a system that rewards comfort over truth. If that upsets people, maybe that's the proof I was right. By evening, talk shows were dissecting every word he'd said. On Good Morning Britain, a panel debated whether Broadbent was a brave artist or an arrogant has-been. One guest, a young influencer, scoffed, he's just bitter. Times have changed, people don't want to be lectured before breakfast. Another countered, but maybe he's the only one willing to say what others are too scared to. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some praised him. Greater than, finally, someone on TV who's not afraid to tell the truth. Jim Broadbent just said what every serious actor has been thinking for years. Others condemned him. Greater than, how disrespectful to Lorraine. You don't go on someone's show and insult them. Arrogance disguised as honesty. By Friday, ITV's official YouTube channel uploaded the interview clip, heavily edited. The comments exploded. The raw, unfiltered clip that fans had already shared painted a very different picture, one of raw tension and uncomfortable truth. Lorraine, still determined to reclaim her image, addressed the incident briefly on her next broadcast. Sitting in her signature pastel dress, she smiled at the camera, but her tone carried steel. Now, I know many of you saw what happened yesterday, she began. Jim Broadbent is a remarkable actor, no doubt about that. But sometimes, passion can turn into something else. Let's just say, we had different ideas about what morning television should be. The audience chuckled softly, though Lorraine's eyes didn't. She quickly moved on to the next cheerful segment, featuring a celebrity chef and a puppy rescue story. But the damage was already done. That same night, an unexpected twist came. Jim Broadbent's publicist announced that the actor would be doing a live online interview, unfiltered, with no studio, no script. Within hours, the announcement gained hundreds of thousands of RSVPs. When the stream went live, viewers found Jim sitting in a modest study filled with books and old film posters. He looked calm, collected, and defiant. "I didn't go on that show to create drama," he began. "I went to talk about truth in art. But what I said struck a nerve, because we've built a world where being honest feels like rebellion." He paused, then leaned closer to the camera. "Lorraine Kelly is a professional, I respect her. But the system she works in, the one that turns every story into a product, that's what I spoke against. And if that makes me unwelcome on TV, so be it." The livestream ended with over 10 million views in 24 hours. Fans flooded social media with messages of support. Clips of his heartfelt speech spread across platforms, and within a week, major newspapers began calling the moment the Broadbent break. Lorraine's producers, however, were not impressed. Behind the scenes, ITV executives debated whether to officially ban Jim from future appearances. But they couldn't deny it. The controversy had boosted ratings more than any planned segment that month. As days turned into weeks, both figures took different paths. Lorraine continued her show, her tone slightly sharper, her interviews more controlled. But viewers noticed she was no longer as relaxed, as if every guest now came with invisible caution tape. Jim, on the other hand, became something of a folk hero among artists and independent filmmakers. Invitations poured in for him to speak at festivals about authentic storytelling and truth in art. 1 month later, when The Quiet Stranger premiered, it received standing ovations and glowing reviews. Critics called it a haunting masterpiece that captures the loneliness of modern life. During his closing speech at the film's London premiere, Jim smiled at the audience and said softly, "I didn't mean to start a fight on television. I just wanted people to listen. Maybe, after all this noise, they finally did." The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. And somewhere, in her ITV dressing room, Lorraine watched the clip in silence before whispering, almost to herself, "Maybe he was right. But he still didn't have to say it on my show."